I'm worried about the Bulldogs, and not because they're bad, but because the data does not lie and our eyes do not lie. And while it is a team that has undoubtedly been successful and has been improving over the last 2 years, I'm a little bit concerned that they might regress this year. And today, I'm going to tell you why. In this video, I'm going to break things down into 4 clear sections. 1, where the Bulldogs finished in 2025 and why. 2, the issues hiding behind the statistics. 3, why they finished third despite those issues. And 4, the options and decisions that could define their 2026 season and beyond. Because while the Bulldogs got their bite back, the tools for winning an NRL premiership are changing. I'm Larry, and welcome to Larry Talks. If you are new, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help Larry Talks reach 2,000 subscribers. We're on our way to 2,000, and with your help, I know we can get there. We upload daily rugby league content that I know you will enjoy, or it'll have you in the comments, probably wanting to punch me in the face. Anyway, let's get into the video. With the obvious point, the Bulldogs deserve a lot of credit. They have been really successful and have achieved a strong element of success over the past 2 seasons. After failing to reach the final since 2016, the Bulldogs had overcome their hoodoo and, after 8 long years, had managed to achieve NRL finals participation. The Bulldogs finished 7th in the 2024 season after a really strong recruitment headed up by Stephen Crichton from the Penrith Panthers. The Bulldogs' success in 2004 was achieved through a non-traditional recruitment method. The Bulldogs didn't seek to get class, polish, or finesse. They sought to fix a culture. The signing of Cameron Ciraldo from the Penrith Panthers signaled a change of the guard for the Bulldogs. Ciraldo's signing not only symbolized a change of coach, which is obvious, but it symbolized a change of strategy, a change of recruitment, a change of playing, a change of identity. The Bulldogs have always been synonymous with the Dogs of War. You always hear fans talk about, we have to bring back the Dogs of War. We have to bring back the entertainers of the 80s, the Dogs of War of the 90s. The unbelievable finesse that we saw leading up to the 2004 grand final. The Bulldogs have since been waiting for their last premiership to date. But what the signings represented was a changing of the guard. And we didn't see the Bulldogs looking to sign the biggest, meanest, best forwards in the NRL, the most explosive, fast and powerful backs in the NRL, or the most expensive halves available in the market. What the Bulldogs signings represented was we would need to put the culture back. We need to put the bite back through hard work, determination, grit. And that was achieved in the signings of 2004. Stephen Crichton was a brilliant player, but what the Bulldogs were signing was a leader that could lead the Bulldogs in 2025 and beyond. Let's look at those signings. Kurt Mann, Josh Curran. Sam Hughes was promoted to the first grade squad. Jacob Preston broke into the NRL team. Connor Tracy, an NRL outcast of the Cronulla Sharks. Those players all represented hard work, grit, determination, and we can't deny that they have brought that to the Bulldogs. They have undoubtedly been hard to beat. After the success of 2024, the Bulldogs were then expected to make leaps and boundaries in 2025. And dare I say, the fans were optimistic about premiership success. Perhaps a little bit hard overhead and more emotionally rather than logically, but there was reason to be optimistic. It was a young team, and it was a team that had achieved success in 2024 and had made a really astute signing in the likes of Salidi Tupanua from the Sydney Roosters, who had undoubtedly strengthened the team. They had signed Bronson Xerri in the previous season, who was a great comeback story. After 1 year back in the NRL at the age of 24, was expected to then kick on and have even better performances. Jacob Kiraz, another young, exciting prospect, was another year older with another year of NRL experience behind him. The likes of Viliami Kikau, Matt Burton getting into his mid-20s, Toby Sexton had just come off a successful final series. There was reason for the Bulldogs to be optimistic about 2025. And boy, oh boy, did they perform. They finished in the top 4 since 2012, and it all seemed to taper off. After being first halfway through the NRL season, the Bulldogs really fell away. Now, some will tell you that that was the signing of Lachlan Galvin, but there is a deeper story behind it, and we're going to go into the statistics. So that brings us to section 2. So halfway through the 2025 season, the Bulldogs found themselves in first position. Then they signed Lachlan Galvin. Bulldogs fans, journalists, and critics from inside and outside of the Bulldogs couldn't make sense, and everyone had an opinion on the Lachlan Galvin signing. Why would you sign someone halfway through the season, particularly a halves player, when you're coming first? Where is he going to play? Toby Sexton is playing really well. Re-sign Toby Sexton. Why are you signing Lachlan Galvin? Move Matt Burton to centre. Everyone had an opinion on the Lachlan Galvin signing, especially because the Bulldogs were coming first. But Cameron Ciraldo saw what a lot of Bulldogs fans did not see. That first place position did not represent the Bulldogs in their annual form. The Bulldogs do have and require a lot of work, and the stats tell that story. Bulldogs in 2025 finished 8th for points scored. They finished 5th for line breaks. Now, you hear those stats up front, and you say, that's really promising. There are problems with the Bulldogs' attack. Let's start with the big picture. In 2025, the Bulldogs finished 8th for points scored in the NRL, and they finished 5th for line breaks. Now, on the surface, these sound like promising statistics. Here's the red flag. The Bulldogs were the only team in the top 5 for line breaks who didn't. Every other team who were above the Bulldogs for points scored were also the same sides who were in the top 5 for line breaks. But when it came to points scored, the Bulldogs dropped to 8th. So what that says is the Bulldogs don't convert the opportunities that they create. They're good at creating opportunities for line breaks, which is great, but they're missing the right amount of support play, and there's a little bit of missing structure in the attack. I'm going to go a little bit further. I think the Bulldogs are a side that lacks structure in attack. If you look at where the Bulldogs do excel, Jacob Kiraz, 70 offloads. Viliami Kikau, 52 offloads. Those two players were in the top 5 in the NRL for offloads. Jacob Kiraz leading in terms of offloads. It's also important to note that Jacob Kiraz played a lesser amount of games than the second most amount of offloads in the NRL, which was Terrell May. Bulldogs are very reliant on second phase play, but also it shows an over-reliance on ad-lib football because there is a lack of structure. Kiraz and Kikau are lead offloaders, and as a team, the Bulldogs ranked 4th in the NRL for offloads. But that tells us something really important. The Bulldogs' attack relies on ad-lib chaos, not structure. That's not by accident, that's by necessity. When we also look at the forwards, the Bulldogs lack in making meters. The Bulldogs ranked 7th in post-contact meters in the NRL. And Matt King was the only Bulldogs forward in the top 50. I'm going to repeat that. Matt King was the only Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs forward in the top 50 for post-contact meters. Meanwhile, the minor premiers, the Canberra Raiders, and all 4 of the prelim finalists, the Cronulla Sharks, the Penrith Panthers, the Brisbane Broncos, the Melbourne Storm, all 4 of these teams and the Canberra Raiders who finished minor premiers were in the top 5 for post-contact meters. That story alone tells you that to be successful in the NRL, to be in the contention for NRL Premiership, you need to be a side that is capable of making the hard yards. You need to be a team that is capable of bullying other NRL teams into making meters. That doesn't necessarily convert straight into you need bigger forwards. That's managing a strong kicking game. That's building kick pressure through your chase and having strong field position. That's through repeat sets. That's through getting your kicking game right. All of these things contribute to being able to have more possession, which allow you to then keep the ball and make more meters. But the thing is, Bulldogs don't struggle in possession. Bulldogs were in the top 3 for possession. The highest NRL team finished on 81%. The Bulldogs had a 79% average completion rate. So possession is not the issue. And in fact, Bulldogs had the highest amount of possession of all NRL sides. They averaged 52% most games. So what that tells us is the Bulldogs have their equal share of the ball. They don't need more ball. It's about what they do with it. This is a fair question. If the attack has issues, why did the Bulldogs finish 3rd? Well, it's because the Bulldogs are a brilliant defensive team. At the start of the video, I spoke about the astute signings and the changing of the guard under Cameron Ciraldo. The signings of Josh Curran, the signings of Kurt Mann, the promotion of Bailey Hayward into the first grade side. Reid Marnie was already a signing that had been made in the years prior. Jacob Preston being promoted into the NRL side. Sam Hughes being promoted into the NRL side. All of these players represent a grit, a determination, a comeback story, being an NRL journeyman, whatever it may be. With the exception of Jacob Preston, I think he was a young, talented player who was ready for his opportunity in first grade. But if you look at every other player, Bronson Cherry, a comeback story after a 4-year ban. The Bulldogs were a very determined group of players. But if you look at the forward signings and the middle signings more specifically, they were players in a smaller mold, but it allowed the Bulldogs to play with a high intensity defensive line. The Bulldogs conceded the least points in the NRL in 2025. They ranked third for completion rate at 79%, as I mentioned. The league high was 81%. They led the league in charge downs, but they crucially conceded the second most penalties. Now, you can concede a lot of penalties if you have a smaller forward pack, because that means you've got a more mobile pack. The fact that we were leading the NRL in charge downs tells me we play with a really fast line and we play with an intensity that most NRL clubs couldn't compete with. The Bulldogs' size allowed them to have this fast, aggressive defensive line, concede penalties instead of tries, and suffocate opposition attacks. It's ugly, it's exhausting, but it worked. And the Bulldogs' finals position did not lie. Like I said, they finished third. They finished in the top four for the first time in 8 years. They were coming first up until the halfway point of the NRL season. This works, and there's no reason to say that that shouldn't necessarily change. But the Bulldogs' defensive success came at a cost. Premiership teams don't just defend. They make meters, they score points, they thrill, and they have creative spines. And these are things where the Bulldogs hit their ceiling. So now we get to the pointy end of the video, the spine problem, and then let's talk about what the Bulldogs can do to potentially fix it. Let's talk numbers, and let's talk about the Bulldogs spine. Spine at the back end of the NRL season was Connor Tracy at fullback, Matt Burton and Lachlan Galvin in the halves, and Bailey Hayward. I'm going to tell you some statistics around some of these players, and I have to be honest with you, it's not good reading. Let's start with Matt Burton. His NRL season finished with 122 running meters per game as an average, which is brilliant and really, really high. He played over 20 NRL games. He finished with 4 try assists. Lachlan Galvin averaged 92 meters per game. So again, really positive running game, ran the ball a lot. Support play was really positive. Lachlan Galvin didn't get into the top 10 or the top 15 for NRL try assists. Now, in terms of the whole season, Lachlan Galvin finished with 13 try assists, but a portion of that was at the West Tigers. So when you look at what his performances were for the Bulldogs, in terms of what his output was, he wouldn't finish in the top 50 in terms of try assists in the NRL. And there's Bailey Hayward, who was promoted above Reid Marnie in the back end of the NRL season, and who was really strong defensively. He lacked creativity out of dummy half. This matters. When your hooker and your halves aren't creating, the team is forced to rely on offloads and broken play. And that's what Serraldo has been forced to lean into. He's coaching to the roster he has. I don't think this is a coaching issue. I think it's a player personnel issue. I spoke about earlier that the Bulldogs are in the top 4 NRL teams when it comes to offloads. With the likes of Jacob Kiraz, with the likes of Viliami Kikau, we have been able to create second phase play that allows us to be creative and perhaps lead to the line breaks that we've been seeing. But the penalties, the lack of size, the constant defensive workload, that fatigues the team, and that fatigue kills creativity. So what can the Bulldogs do about it? Let's talk about the options. So the big name on most Bulldogs fans' lips and even NRL fans' lips is Mitchell Woods. And we're going to talk about him in a moment, but I want to talk through 4 potential options that the Bulldogs have to attempt throughout the NRL season. Matt Burton could move to center and Crichton could move to fullback. This puts the ball in Crichton's hands more, which is a positive. In terms of try assists, Stephen Crichton was one of the Bulldogs' better performers. He led in try assists for the Bulldogs with Connor Tracy, both achieving 12 try assists in the 2025 season. But if we look at the semi-final against Penrith, and we saw Matt Burton deployed at left center and Cherry moved to the right, Burton didn't play well. And in fact, the Panthers tore him apart. Cherry has also played his best football at left center. Now, there's an argument that Stephen Crichton is the Bulldogs' best player, and I'm not going to sit here and disagree with you about that. He's also the Bulldogs' captain, and I'm sure he would do a very strong job at NRL level as a fullback. I think he could, in fact, do an elite level performance. The issue with moving Stephen Crichton to fullback is he's arguably, and in my opinion, the best center in the NRL. He's the best defensive center in the NRL, and his attack has just gone strength to strength over the last few years. The game against Canberra sticks out in my mind when the Bulldogs made a comeback from 20-0 down. That was on Stephen Crichton's back at centre. He just destroyed the Raiders. He tore them apart. Dare I say, he put in a Mal Meninga-like performance that day. And we've seen that level of performance from Stephen Crichton. He's become the type of player that the Bulldogs can give the ball to when they're looking for an element of creativity, a spark, or some points. To move Stephen Crichton to fullback, and we did see glimpses of it in attack at least while Connor Tracy was out injured. Stephen Crichton has creativity. He's got a brilliant pass on him. I think he's actually a really good playmaker, and perhaps that element of his game is underrated. You'd be strengthening one position, but weakening another. I think the Bulldogs would concede more points with Stephen Crichton at fullback because the centers in Bronson Xerri on the right, Bronson Xerri has not looked good defensively on the right-hand side. You limit his ability offensively playing on the right-hand side because he's got that left-hand carry and that right-hand fend. Going across his body, I think you're limiting Bronson Xerri's best work. Matt Burton hasn't played centre since he achieved the Dally M Centre of the Year for the Penrith Panthers in 2022. It was a long time ago. Matt Burton hasn't been a consistent centre for the best part of 4 years. I think asking him to move to centre isn't going to strengthen the Bulldogs. And let's talk about Matt Burton for a moment. Does Matt Burton really want to be a centre at this point in his career? The Bulldogs are paying him a salary that is the equivalent of a premier NRL 5/8. He's been branded and marketed around the number 6 jersey. He's coming off contract shortly. He'll want to demand the best possible contract for himself. You do that by wearing the number 6 jersey. So that brings us to option 2. You stick with Matt Burton at 6 and you stick with Lachlan Galvin in 7. It's safe. It's familiar. It got the Bulldogs into the top 4. But the ceiling stays the same. As we said, the Bulldogs finished 8th for points scored in the 2025 season, 5th for line breaks. The Bulldogs are not creative enough. Matt Burton, in particular, 4 try assists in the NRL season last year. I don't think that that's what you need. You can't have one of your halves returning 4 try assists if you want to win a premiership. I think Matt Burton has a really strong running game and at times looks most dangerous when he runs, but there needs to be more creativity to his game. I guess the question mark I have is Matt Burton running first because he's being told to? Or is Matt Burton simply showing us that that's the kind of player he is? I want to highlight that none of these comments are suggesting that Matt Burton shouldn't be a Bulldogs player, isn't capable of being an elite Bulldogs player, or anything of the kind. And I dare say the same for the whole squad. You could argue that the Bulldogs need a change. And I think every player that the Bulldogs put out for their top 17, or what most people would put in the Bulldogs predicted 17 to start the season, I think every single player is a quality NRL player in their own right. But I think the challenge for every NRL team is to get the balance correct. Get the balance between a more mobile forward and bigger forwards. Get the balance right between running halves and creative halves. Get the balance right between fast outside backs and powerful outside backs. You want good playmakers. You want a center who's good offensively. You want a good defensive center. There's all these elements that NRL coaches and clubs need to think of when they're assembling an NRL squad. And I think the Bulldogs have gotten themselves to a strong position, but I think that the dynamic of the squad does now need a change. Then there's option 3. And I think this one's probably the most exciting option. Lachlan Galvin moves to 6 and Mitchell Woods moves to 7. This likely gives you creativity and structure. Mitchell Woods is a really exciting prospect. He's been spoken about by NRL Bulldogs fans for the best part of 2 years. When he was in the SG Bull squad 2 years ago, he had a really strong return in terms of try assists, run meters, tries. He's played for New South Wales at a State of Origin under 18s level. Mitchell Woods is highly touted. Mitchell Woods has been a player that the Bulldogs have been aware is on their books, but is someone that they've been really careful and diligent and articulate about when they promote him in a first grade. Injuries have plagued him in throughout 2025, perhaps stopped him from the opportunity to get his NRL debut. I think he gets his NRL debut this year. I guess the question mark will be, what are the circumstances in which he gets his debut? Is it because of a drop-off in form or because of an injury? or because of rotation? And point two to that is, once he gets his opportunity, does he take it? The opportunity is there for Mitchell Woods, and I think the potential is there as well for him to. So what Mitchell Woods does bring is he is an organizer. He's got a strong kicking game. He's got a strong running game. But crucially, I think he provides structure and creativity to a Bulldog spine that is lacking in those areas. I think it's also important to highlight about Lachlan Galvin that him and Matt Burton are almost in the same mold. They play very similar styles, but neither of them is an organizing half. And I think that that's where Mitchell Woods has the best opportunity. He offers something different to those two players. But the question mark will then be, if Woods and Galvin are your halves, well, where does that leave Matt Burton? And then there's the final option, which is Mitchell Woods and Burton in the halves. I think that this one's really unlikely. It does put a rookie with a more experienced half, but in saying that, I think that Lachlan Galvin was a big money signing last year. He's a 20-year-old half. I think he is where the Bulldogs see their future. Bulldogs absolutely see Lachlan Galvin as part of their future. That's why they break the bank for him. That's why they brought him in mid-season. And that's why I think he'll definitely be a mainstay in the Hearts. I think it's Mitchell Woods or Matt Burton. That's where the debate is. With all of this, here comes my prediction. By mid-season, I expect that Stephen Crichton will go to fullback. I expect Woods and Galvin to get a run in the halves. And I expect that Matt Burton will be tried at centre to accommodate that change. But long term, I don't think that this works. Like I mentioned earlier, I think Burton is not a centre. He's not anymore. He may have been in his previous years, but he is. I'm sure if you ask Matt Burton what he considers himself to be, he'll tell you he's an NRL 5'8". And I think the Bulldogs really need creativity in the spine. Ultimately, I think this ends with Matt Burton leaving the Bulldogs. There's no certainty here. Injuries, forms, and results will decide everything. But one thing is clear, Mitchell Woods will get an opportunity. It's just about whether he takes it. And how the Bulldogs handle the Matt Burton situation and the evolution of all of these things coming into place will define the next phase of this rebuild. Matt Burton currently has his contract expiring in 2027. I think Matt Burton leaves the Bulldogs at the end of the 2026 season. Phil Gould plays his cards close to his chest when people ask him things on X, and I know he's recently come out and said, don't worry about Matt Burton. I know Matt Burton's agent has come out and suggested he's had conversations with the Bulldogs. I think the Perth Bears will be extremely interested in Matt Burton. I think he could get close to $1 million a season at the Perth Bears. I think he's a brilliant NRL half. I just question whether he's what the Bulldogs need today. Because the Bulldogs have decided to buy Lachlan Galvin, I think that now puts Matt Burton on the periphery of the NRL halves for the Bulldogs. And I think that by the end of the year, Mitchell Woods and Lachlan Galvin will be the Bulldogs halves and will be the two halves who I believe can lead the Bulldogs closer towards premiership glory. The Bulldogs rebuilt themselves on defense, effort, and discipline, and it worked. And there's no reason to believe that won't work into 2026. I think this is why the Bulldogs will again secure a finals berth in 2026. Because if you don't concede points, you're fighting in every single game. There's no denying that. But premiership teams score points, they make meters, and they create. And I think for the Bulldogs to become a team in the NRL finals to a premiership threat, they're going to need to add that creativity, that grit, and that size. Leo Thompson does help the Bulldogs in that sense this year. I think he will have a really positive impact, and he definitely provides the Bulldogs with some size. We've also got the likes of Jack Todd and Jack Underhill, who Jack Todd, if it wasn't for injuries, I think would be a mainstay of the NRL team. It's a shame he broke his arm 2 games in NRL appearances. Made a few more appearances toward the back end of the season after recovering from his broken arm, but a lot will rely on him. And I think this might be the year we see Jack Underhill come in. So that adds a lot of size to the Bulldogs, but it does mean that there's inexperience. And then there's the halves issue, which I don't see going away anytime soon. I think Connor Tracy is an all-efforts player. I think he's a brilliant support player, and I think he can actually be part of a Bulldogs successful team. The questions lay at the halves. The Bulldogs have big decisions to make. Stay the team they are, or make some bold decisions and become the team that they want to be. That's why I'm worried, but I'm backing them all the way. There you have it. There's my view of the Bulldogs heading into 2026. We will be doing an NRL predictions video as well as previewing every NRL team season, and I'll give you my prediction for the Bulldogs and where I think they'll finish in upcoming videos as we get closer to the NRL proper. But if you did enjoy the video, make sure you do hit a like. It does help us a lot. And subscribe if you're new. I've been Larry. Get those comments in, and we'll talk to you soon. Get out of here.